Hi, I'm Amy Romalis and welcome to UNI TV, your window on university life. Feeling hungry? Today's show is all about food. Eating it, growing it, and some revolutionary ways to use it. We'll be looking at environmentally friendly farming, how biodiesel could bring aviation to developing countries, and why exactly is chocolate so delicious. But first up, we'll be meeting with a team of guys who've cycled around Australia spreading the word of sustainability. Headed by UNSW student Matt Coggan, they're known as My Power, and as far as they're concerned, it's easy being green.
Four guys, 3 bikes and 1 support car, travelling 16,000 kilometres around Australia to highlight positive environmental action.
G'day everyone, it's Matt Coggan here from My Power.
They're called My Power, and they're filming their journey to bring us environmental tales from their travels.
I'm Matt, joined with Marikai and Tom. Tom's going to show us around the food forest here at Aurora, north of Adelaide. Let's go check it out.
The food forest shows what an average family can do on a typical income to live sustainably. The place is run by the Brookman family. The family grows 160 varieties of organically certified food using the principles of permaculture. That means things like using the landscape wisely for multiple purposes.
We've also got eucalypt windbreaks around a lot of our orchards, which now don't really serve as much of a purpose, but when the orchards were young they'd protect them from wind damage, and now we just harvest those windbreaks for firewood.
Using natural predators to keep away bugs and placing all the elements intelligently are other key concepts.
So there's a few herbs just growing in there that we use during cooking, like lemongrass, sage, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's a little dry at the moment because its water got cut off for 2 weeks. But yeah, I mean that little garden there could easily provide enough herbs for you to cook year round, depending on what you planted. And I think that's something that's particularly for people who are interested in permaculture in urban areas, is a really important part of design, is having that functional garden right next to the house. So that, and I mean, human beings are generally lazy creatures, so minimising the effort is a big thing in creating a functional design.
Even on these little apple trees here, they got a white trunk painted on only one side. Cuts down, reflects the sunlight on the northern sun here, just on that side of the trunk, so the plant doesn't have to battle so much with the heat on this side. It's just a good idea.
Hawthorn 7-2, and Hawthorn have picked their own.
Rain today. The food forest was a very interesting experience. We learned a lot about permaculture and sustainable living while we were there, and we now understand just how important permaculture is going to be in the future for Australians to start living more sustainably.
Weeds are the bane of a farmer's life. And herbicide, with all its environmental dangers, has been one of the few ways to control weeds. But now a team led by UNSW Associate Professor Jay Katapidia has designed a unique system to eradicate weeds that is autonomous and environmentally friendly.
This project is called the Green Weeder project. Primarily why it is called Green Weeder is this is going to be non-herbicidal system. It will not use any herbicides at all. We have actually designed a robot that has propulsion and steering. Like any other autonomous system that is operating on its own out in the field, you need to maintain contact with the base station, and this is the long-range communication systems antenna. And the small antenna up at the front here, this is receiving the GPS corrections from a base station so that the GPS system can tell us where it is. We call this a laser rangefinder. It is a laser beam that is starting from the device and going to the front. It's like blind man's stick. It is going through 180 degrees from left-hand side to right-hand side. And when this information is passed inside the system, it can actually do the calculations and determine where the crop rows are actually being laid out, and therefore how to steer it and guide it along the crop rows. At the back of the system that you see here is an electrocution system that will be targeting weeds. Yeah, those copper pieces are the ones that are actually causing the electrocution. So if a plant comes to within about 2 centimeters of this here, then it will electrocute the plant and it will kill the plant. These two beams can come out, and when you pull this out, the entire electrocution system comes off, and then a new system can be inserted back in. Let's say this mechanical reading system can be inserted back in, and the same tests can be carried out because the guidance system remains the same. And we can replace that electrocution system with mechanical reading systems or heating systems or any kind of system that we want to experiment with. And that's the next stage where we will go and investigate all possible weed eradication systems that are qualifying as non-herbicidal ways, and then to go and choose what is most appropriate for a given scenario. The project has got great potential for commercialization. Non-herbicidal weeding is extremely attractive for environmental reasons and cost effectiveness.
The Green Weeder, coming soon to weed a field near you.
Some blue-green algae can kill humans and animals that drink water polluted by these microbes. The threat is rising due to pollution, agricultural runoff, and rising surface temperature of water supplies from global warming. Brett Nealon has pinpointed the genes that cause potent toxins in blue-green algae and developed an early warning testing system that differentiates harmful and non-harmful species. In August 2007, his technology was successfully applied to the blue-green algal infestation of Warragamba Dam that threatened the safety of Sydney's water supply. His testing revealed that species in question had previously been toxic. However, the August bloom of 2007 didn't contain genes capable of producing a harmful toxin. Based on Professor Nealon's analysis, Sydney's water supply remained open, and expensive treatment and filtration systems weren't brought online unnecessarily. The outcomes were reported to the New South Wales Parliament. Diagnostic Technology Proprietary Limited has licensed his technology and acquired the rights to market and produce a diagnostic kit. Patents are being issued in some of the world's biggest markets for this technology, in Australia, Europe, USA, Japan and South Africa. Professor Nealon is an ARC Federation Fellow. He heads the Centre for Cyanobacteria and Astrobiology in the Science Faculty at the University of New South Wales.
Hi, I'm Dan Gaffney, and joining me on the couch today is Dr. Julian Cox. He's an expert in food science, and a passionate communicator about that topic and others. Welcome to the couch, Julian.
Thanks, Dan. Happy to be here.
One of your areas of expertise, speaking about that, is food and nutrition and the science therein. I'm curious to hear your take on this question. It's a large topic. Food's been around for a long time. Human culture's been around for a long time. The ancient Greeks, the ancient Egyptians knew a lot about food, presumably. Are we any smarter or more knowledgeable or literate about food as a culture than they were?
Oh, I think so. I think what we have more than what they had was the whys. We understand why certain foods are the way they are. That's what science has done for us. If we go back to those ancient times, particularly when civilization began, I mean, we really found that they were already experimenting in a very haphazard way in creating new foods. They learned how to preserve foods using drying, using salt, and some of the same processes we still use today. They were producing fermented foods, bread, wine, beer, and they didn't know how those products were made in the scientific sense. They really just knew in a very broad process sense how those happened. But nevertheless, they realised very quickly how they could take various food products, improving the variety of foods, and also how they could extend the shelf life of food. So they had a much better food supply than their predecessors, the hunter-gatherers.
So you've mentioned the storage of food, but it seems like there's a lot of fast food around these days, Julian. What is it that fast food outlets and franchises do well around the taste of food in particular?
I don't know if it's so much the taste. I think it's purely the convenience angle that has got buy-in from society in general, because whether it's true or not, we certainly perceive ourselves as increasingly time poor, that for many people food is that fast fix. You know, we recognise it's a need, in some cases it's a want, but basically it's a very quick, convenient way of getting that process, natural process, out of the way so we can then move on to other things. I don't think that fast food is quite the problem that we perceive, provided it's something that we consume in moderation. I mean, some of the nutritionists I know will say that the occasional Big Mac in an otherwise balanced diet is perfectly reasonable. If you eat hamburgers all the time, they're certainly not good for you, and I think we can all see that as pretty much common sense. I think one of the cases in point in terms of how society is responding to fast food is the way the fast food industry is recognising that they can't get away with providing what we perceive traditionally as fast food. You know, fat, grease, lots of sugar. We're seeing increasingly a lot of healthy options appearing in the fast food menus of a range of chains, of franchises. And of course we're seeing some fast food outlets that have based their business on a platform of healthy eating. Some of those long sandwiches, for example, just trying to avoid brand names.
Just talking about down to fundamentals about nutrition. I mean, you mentioned fat, you mentioned sugar, for example. What is it about chocolate in particular that is so great to the human taste buds?
It's an interesting question. I think it's a whole range of things, because there's the flavour in itself. There's also the fat. That the cocoa butter that goes into chocolate is a very unusual type of fat. To try and reproduce that is very, very difficult. A lot of people have tried to look at ways they can actually get that same sensation from the fat using fats from other sources. The fat melts beautifully in the mouth, and it's got a lusciousness that's quite different. We know that some fats, for instance, on meats are too solid at body temperature, so they have a greasy feel. Others are quite liquid and have an oily feel, but we get that lusciousness from the fat. We've also, of course, got some of the chemicals that come from the cocoa bean that give us that sense of euphoria. They affect the brain, they affect our breathing, they make us feel good. And so people get used to that. I mean, you can probably actually get hooked on chocolate in the same way you might get hooked on something more illicit. But I think it's that combination. I mean, the beautiful flavours and aromas, the lusciousness of the fat, and also these chemicals within the chocolate that really give us this sense of well-being, of euphoria.
Right, so it's that fantastic mouthfeel and a bit of an orgasm for the brain, is that it?
That's one way of putting it, yeah.
It surprises me when I go to restaurants these days, sometimes high-end restaurants, and I see bangers and mash on the menu, and I think, gosh, I'm going back to the 1960s. What's that about?
I think to me it's trying to marry people's comfort zone with new approaches to the delivery of those old favourites. So that people, as you said, see something on the menu that says bacon and eggs or bangers and mash. But when you see what's being done with that dish, it might be a very beautifully handcrafted banger, or it might be that what they've done with that dish is deconstructed and reconceptualised that dish so that it's actually something that doesn't look like the traditional bangers and mash, and it's giving you that sense of surprise and putting that new twist on an old favourite.
If a UNSW researcher has her way, it won't be long before a plate of prawn shells like this is more valuable than the actual prawns themselves. Renuka Karapaswamy has developed a new technique for extracting a powerful antioxidant. The antioxidant is called astaxanthin. It's the pigment which gives cooked prawns their red colour, and it's a superfood ingredient.
This antioxidant has higher antioxidant potential than any other carotenoids, which is commonly found in fruits and vegetables, and this antioxidant can be used in food and health applications.
Renuka's technique is efficient enough to make extraction viable on a commercial scale. It beats the current method of producing the antioxidant synthetically through a chemical process. It also addresses a worldwide problem of managing prawn waste.
I'm a concerned environmentalist, and that's why I got interested into prawn waste management.
So, heads or tails, it's a win either way.
Water, the one vital ingredient that all plant life can't do without. But sometimes the very thing that gives life can also take it away. In many parts of Australia, water also brings salt. Although many plants can survive on salty water, soil cannot. Associate Professor Greg Leslie from the University of New South Wales School of Chemical Sciences and Engineering is taking the first steps to helping solve this problem.
Water is a big issue in Australia. It's probably one of the, next to the greenhouse problem, how we manage our water is really the big issue that we've got to address to support our population now and into the future.
Extracting salt from salty water and then getting the water to plants in an astoundingly efficient and simple way.
So what we're looking at here is a channel. This would be a tube that has a window in it, and the window contains a small piece of reverse osmosis membrane. The soil hasn't been watered in over 3 months. The only way the plant gets water is to suck water out of the tube across the membrane. That limits the amount of salt that goes into the soil, and the plants continue to grow.
One of the most ingenious aspects of the system is that it requires no external energy at all to run.
In drier years, farmers can use the poor quality water to continue to produce a crop with this technology. In the wetter years, when they would just use regular irrigation techniques, the material, probably made from a cellulosic base, would just break down and stay in the soil.
Greg's reverse osmosis membrane technology supplies water directly to the roots where it's needed most, minimising waste and, better still, using the plant's energy alone to function.
The implications are that we would arm farmers with a technique that they could use in dry years when they don't have any water available to them except brackish groundwater. They could use that groundwater to still produce a crop, but without damaging the soil, so that the land would still be productive when surface waters return to when surface water becomes available.
The system is proving effective for most common market garden crops and is expected to be in production within the next few years.
In many of these countries, rail and road infrastructure is poor or non-existent. During natural disasters and emergencies, many lives would be saved if planes and helicopters were available. John Page and John Olsen from the School of Mechanical Engineering are working on a way to bring helicopters to the skies of developing countries.
The limitation, of course, on aviation activity within developing countries comes in 3 forms. One form is the cost of the vehicles themselves, which are often based on military aircraft and thus are beyond the budgets of many small countries. The second problem is skilled people to operate the aircraft. Helicopters in particular require highly skilled pilots. And the third case is that of fuel. Most of these countries can't afford fuel because of the cost in real dollars, and also fuel availability becomes a real problem at times of crisis.
Although biofuels have been available as a source of energy for some time now, they haven't been used in the area of aviation.
Well, biodiesel is a good source of fuel because crude oil is running out, and so ordinary diesel fuel is going to run out as well. And so we need to find alternative sources of fuel. And we've looked at 2 alternative sources. We've looked at bioethanol as a possibility, but we're more interested in biodiesel as a possibility. Well, in the third world, they could use any sort of, they could use vegetable oil if they wanted to, or they could use any crops like corn or canola or stuff like that. Practically anything that you can turn into oil, you should be able to ultimately turn that into biodiesel. The problem with biodiesel as an aviation gas is that it has a relatively high freezing point temperature, and so at altitude it's liable to start to gum up, which means that it solidifies and it's not liable to flow through the fuel lines, and so you could end up with your aircraft stalling.
Another problem of using biodiesel in helicopters is that traditionally diesel engines are very heavy, which is not what you want when you're trying to get off the ground. In an effort to get around these sorts of problems, because there are no biodiesel helicopters in the world, the team has also built a helicopter that will travel with the new fuel.
We decided to embark on a project to see what sort of aircraft could utilise that. And obviously the main need is something like a helicopter, because many of the areas you need to get into have no road structures. And indeed, road structures are so energy intensive to construct, it's unlikely they'll ever be able to afford to construct roads. And therefore we worked on the helicopter. About 6 weeks into the design, we start the first simulation model. And then about halfway through the design, we build a wind tunnel model to prove the simulation model is viable. This is very important because there's always a risk with a computer model that in fact it's talking rubbish, because if you put rubbish into a computer you get rubbish out, and so we need to confirm in real hard fact the data we're getting. What's exciting about this project and has inspired the students working on it is that we're using appropriate technology to solve a real third world problem. This is seen by the fact that we're actually developing a fuel in sight for people in those areas where other fuel would not be available, and we're providing a vehicle that can really improve the quality of life of the individuals within those countries.
That's the show for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm Amy Ramalis, and I'll see you next time on UNI TV.